The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.
And you're very welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. Unfortunately, on the back of the news that the Munster-Leinster game has been cancelled this weekend, another match falling victim to COVID. Although I'm not sure how unhappy everyone is about it, given the financial implications of the game going ahead with 5,000 people. Delighted to be joined nonetheless. The podcast goes on, and our last one before Christmas by Donal Lenihan, by Bernard Jackman and Wes Liddy. And Donal, I guess, look, you know, there might be disappointment that the game itself isn't going ahead. I know you and I were supposed to be there in Thomond Park, but if you're Munster and you're looking at a sold-out Thomond Park up to about a week ago versus 5,000 that were supposed to be there, given the COVID restrictions, it's probably not the worst news in the world, is it?
No, it's not. But I suppose the most shattering aspect for me, Hugh, is that I won't get to see you on St. Stephen's Day with your big happy red face and you after a quiet Christmas day.
Well, listen,
somewhere.
I'll drive down to Cork if you want to give you a Christmas hug. How about that?
No, stay where you are. You're grand.
Yeah.
Well, I put it this way. Yeah, look, it was obviously it was a kind of a phased disappointment in a way. Firstly, we heard there was only going to be 5,000 at the match, and then the game was going to be called off. Look, I think given all the COVID issues that are out there anyway, to be interesting to see what teams would have ended up playing. Judging by the basis of the game against Cast, which Thomond Park had its fullest crowd for nearly 2 years, and God, I nearly fell asleep halfway through that. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise in the short term. But look, it is a disappointment over the festive period that you don't have these games. Thankfully, I'll now be able to sit down in front of the telly and watch the Ulster Connacht match, and I'm sure in time, when we're back there with a full house for Munster and Leinster, we'll get to enjoy it in better circumstances.
Yeah, we've been speaking about player welfare issues, Birch, I guess, you know, over the last 6 months on the podcast. Leinster won't be playing now for about 3 weeks, it looks like, so they're getting a bit of a break, even though it's probably not what they would have envisaged. But you look at the calendar now, I mean, you know, the URC games being postponed and having to be replayed, you know, European rugby in serious doubt now about whether we can actually finish the pool stages. And it's just the calendar is becoming a mess with the Six Nations just around the corner.
Yeah, the calendar is a mess. And the URC, in fairness, they have a chance of getting the competition completed, you know, because they had 3 weekends during the Six Nations. But it probably means that Leinster-Munster game now won't be a full-blooded affair. It'll be the non-internationals who end up playing in it. But yeah, we're in a really bad place. I mean, I was speaking to some people involved in Welsh rugby, and you know, one of the fixtures is off because of COVID, Dragons Ospreys, but the other Christmas derbies, which is probably one of the only time of the year where they get big crowds, as now the Welsh government has said has to be played, you know, behind closed doors. So that's a huge blow to them, and they're cash strapped as it is. It's just in a really tricky place at the moment. And look at with the Six Nations on the horizon, you just have to hope that they can get the levels of cases under control, because at the moment a small outbreak seems to run through the squads really quickly.
Yeah, Wesley, I'm hoping to persuade you to turn you into a big horse racing fan December 26th. You and me sit down, have a couple of beers, and I'll explain to you how horse racing works. What do you reckon instead of the match?
I know how it works all too well, Hugh, is the reason I'm not a fan of it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But no, it looks disappointing for, I suppose, a lot of supporters that would have been going to it when it was full. Kind of Bill there, it's kind of the centerpiece of the Christmas, and even for, you know, the likes of ourselves, it's nice to have something to look forward to over the few days. But as you say, the full house probably softens the blow a little bit. It does make the Champions Cup organisers, I suppose, vindicated in their decision to pull the plug on that Leinster-Montpellier game last week. With the benefit of hindsight, it was a correct decision, it seems. You do wonder, with 20 or 30 internationals in their squad, could Leinster still field the team? But I suppose when it was yesterday that the news broke, you counted down, it's 5 days to Sunday. So I suppose the rationale, I'm guessing, is that there's a huge amount of close contacts, maybe as much as cases, is what's led to the postponement. But obviously not privy to that information, but speculating.
It's just from the European context, Donal, it does look that Europe is going to be the one, if a competition has to suffer, that Europe will be the fall guy. And I say that, from experience last year, we all remember what happened as well. We know the French attitude towards it, particularly the French clubs that don't particularly buy into it or who probably have chances have gone already. They just won't fulfill fixtures now, if there's any reason to give them an out clause. And you just wonder now what Europe will do, what the heads will do to try and kind of mash a competition together so that we do get a result this season, because it does seem vulnerable at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, you saw the response from the CAS president before the game against Munster last week. He made it absolutely clear that they had no interest whatsoever travelling over to Limerick. There were going to be there were 7 clubs in the Champions, 7 French clubs in the Champions Cup. All the other 6 games were cancelled either for COVID or because of the French government's travel ban on UK travelling in and out of the UK. So. Cast almost came to Limerick under protest. Now, to be fair, they did show up and they made the game competitive. But you just get the impression with the French clubs, because of what's happening there, unfortunately, for the majority of the clubs, not all of them, but the Champions Cup is down their list of priorities. We've seen Montpellier, for example, in the first round, when COVID wasn't a major issue a couple of weeks ago. They left all their main players at home. They went over to Exeter and got beaten 42-3 or 42-6 or something.
Yeah, Don, this is not good. Look, I know this is the French attitude in respect, and they're kind of allowed to get away with this because it's the French and the top 14 is the be-all and end-all. But it annoys me as a European rugby fan that they are allowed to do this and that they do this. And I just don't think this is sustainable, because the more I see the attitude of the French clubs, and it's the French clubs that make this a European competition, really, the more I see of their attitude, the more it just seems to devalue the tournament. And I find that very frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, so do I. Look, I mean, I wrote a piece in the Examiner this morning about how, unfortunately, the Champions Cup is being diluted. Now, to be fair, Mark Jones, the press officer, the press guy with EPCR, was on to me this morning already, just looking to engage to let me know what's happening, which is great. I'm delighted to see them reaching out on the back of my own piece this morning. But I mean, I find it very disconcerting that, the French, they haven't been engaging, but they're not the only ones. I mean, to be fair, Leicester, who were top of the Gallagher Premiership, they made 8 or 9 changes to go down. They played Bordeaux-Bègles, now, who were top of the French, the top 14. To be fair to them, they won the game, which shows you maybe A, just how deep a squad Steve Borthwick is building at Leicester, but B, for the leading, the club at the top of the French 14 to be beaten at home in the opening game, sort of, I was a bit surprised with that result, I must say. But look, to be fair to the Champions Cup, it's the 3rd season where they've been massively hit by the COVID scenario. They do have that little bit of wriggle room now. I mean, the one new innovation that I was looking forward to last year and this year was this home and away. Last year it was supposed to be in the knockout phase. This year it's penciled in for the round of 16, where you were going to have back-to-back home and away games where the aggregate score would dictate who was going forward to the next round. I have to say, I thought it was a very good innovation, one that I was really looking forward to, but I put my house in it that's going to be cancelled now. They have to change the tournament midstream. That is the only way that they can generate an additional date to be able to play some of those postponed games. So, look, it's hugely difficult. This time of the year, I was making the point this morning, when you had the 4 rounds before Christmas and you had that big crescendo, in the week or 2 building up to the Christmas period, how many times have we been down in Perpignan, in Claremont, in Toulouse, in brilliant, like the atmosphere in Christmas down in those cities, the colour in the squares, the atmosphere in the grounds, it made your Christmas. And you had I have fantastic memories over the years, Claremont in particular. They had these brilliant markets, and but that's gone. And COVID has diluted it for everybody in the first place. And look, to be fair, there's little or nothing EPCR can do about that. But I just find it sad that this was the competition, that we really look forward to. But it's, through no fault of their own, it's been diluted hugely, both by the actions of the clubs and by the COVID scenario.
Yeah, and the URC is not getting off scot-free at all, Birch. I saw it this morning that Dai Young says that Cardiff are going to need convincing now to travel back to South Africa based on their experience there over the last month or so. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and I read Dai Young's piece and Josh Turnbull as well, who's the captain and is a very level-headed guy. Effectively, they were in some kind of isolation or quarantine for a month, and their argument is that, you know, to go back there in March, I think they're scheduled to go back. They'll need some assurances from the Welsh government and the UK government that if something happens again, that they'll get them home, and that's the big thing. So they're not saying, you know, we're not willing to go back, but they're just saying, look, we need to know what we're heading into and be able to explain that to our families, that if there is another outbreak or there's in the squad there, that they'll be able to get back. And I know it's difficult to get, you know, certainty on these things, but you know, I'd say it'd be very hard for Dai Young to convince, you know, people with young families that it's worth the risk. And I think, unfortunately, I'd actually imagine that those games will be played in Italy this time. I just like they were going to be, you know, I don't see teams going to South Africa, unfortunately, you know, for the rest of the season, and it's terribly difficult for them. But I'd imagine those games will be played, if they can be played at all, if the South Africans are able to come back to Europe. But I think it's very hard for, you know, the Cardiff players who got stranded out there. Munster as well, in fairness, they had half the squad stranded to go back again without really understanding the lie of the land.
Yeah, and
just on that point, Hugh. Sorry, I mean, I met one of the Munster players who'd been one of the 14 that was left behind in South Africa. I had a good chat with him last Saturday morning, and he said it was absolutely horrific. I thought they got out for a half an hour, like in the day. They didn't even manage that. They had a balcony in their hotels, and they were able to get in and out, but they never left their hotel room.
My God.
They were given a static bike, and they were cycling on that. The grub was left outside the door. There was communication from the medics, all right, 2 or 3 times a day. But it was horrific. So why would they be rushing to go back there when the whole thing, like, we see how quickly the ground rules change in relation to COVID, and they had a horrendous experience. So, I mean, I fully understand Young coming out and say, lads, we're going nowhere until, at the very least, we get absolute assurance that we can be taken. Like that, he told me they had everything on the plane that Saturday that they were due to fly home. They had everything packed. They were in the airport, and one positive case came back, and everything, they had to turn around to go back to the hotel. He said it was absolutely shattering. You know, the great thing about the team, we'll all stick together. I mean,
which is the fella who tested? Get him back into the hotel and
we're on the plane. So no, but look, I mean, he was able to laugh about it though. But basically, he said it was a horrific 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of horrific experiences, Wes, did you see the Munster game at the weekend?
I did.
It was 2 hours of my life that I will never get back. For people that turned up in Thomond Park, the Christmas spirit, you know, the full house capacity in Limerick, ready to go European night, and what they got was absolute drivel from start to finish. Never seen it like it.
Where's the question there? I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, I'm just teeing you up to have a rant, Wes. I mean, geez, do you need a second invitation to have a rant on this podcast? Yeah.
I didn't think it was as bad. I didn't think it was as bad as all that.
I thought,
no, look, it was pretty bad, in fairness. It was bad. I thought there was a couple of passages that were promising. I thought, listening to what Donal said, kind of emphasised that it was probably somewhat understandable considering the backdrop, you know, of kind of constantly reintegrating players after the whole South African thing, that there'd be a little bit of a lack of cohesion. But I don't know. I suppose they bit the bullet with some of the younger guys that had performed well the week before, like Campbell and Hodnett and a couple of others. And obviously there's a hierarchy there and whatnot, but I nearly wonder, could they have gone a bit further with some of the younger guys that had played the week previously?
I thought Conor Murray was absolutely horrific, and I'm not trying to say like he hasn't been playing well for a long time. He box kicked the ball in positions where Munster had actually, you know, a reasonable chance to attack the cast back line, and Conor Murray went to try box kick the ball. And it was just awful to watch. And
well, it does Copperfasten like that point in the selection, I think, and it's not to be kicking them when they're down, but like in terms of selection, particularly when it comes to youth, and look, we've been going on about this for a long time, but in terms of selection when it comes to youth, and probably tactically too, it seems Munster are the most conservative, of the four provinces.
Yeah. So, but it's basically the question as well, Wes. Basically the question, like, you know, I mean, I think they're getting really lucky here by losing Van Gran. And I was watching this at the weekend, and this is not to say that all Munster games have been like this, but certainly an awful lot of the games that I've watched over the last couple of years in particular, you can point to that same tactical display that we got against Cass on Saturday night.
They definitely seem to revert to that when pressure comes on, without a doubt. Yeah. Like you look at the job Andy Friend has done in Connacht in terms of selecting youth and in terms of the style of play, and I wouldn't buy for a second that like you hear sometimes that, you know, it's not the way the players grew up, they're not used to playing this game. I've always thought that was complete rubbish. There's no way the skill set in Connacht is any better than it is in Munster. And I think it actually, if the people making the decision are looking at it correctly, I think it emphasizes exactly the kind of coach they're looking for when they make the appointment, and that there seems to be a bit of writing on the wall that maybe huge marquee signings are going to be limited for the next period of time, that these young players are going to have to be promoted. I think it's going to come centrally that certain players are going to have to feature more. Great. So I think it's a character, that a guy that's like a real charismatic figurehead, someone that emboldens people, someone that breeds confidence. I think that the assistant coaches can look after the detail around game plan, but I think a figurehead is really important, someone that emboldens youth. And like the only one person they've had that's probably ticked that box over the last number of years is probably Razzie, who obviously didn't last very long. But I think it's someone in that mold as the top man has kind of become clearer and clearer. Yeah, I won't give a word to Jack O'Donoghue though. I thought he had a great game.
Yeah, he did play very well. I thought Hodnett wasn't bad as well. But Birch, honestly, if I was a Munster player now, I'd be kissing the sweet ground, saying, "Thank God your man is gone," because, like, you know, the young players that are there have more than enough talent to come into this Munster team over the next year or two and make it a really exciting team. We've seen all these guys in action for Ireland under-20s, or even for club level, some of them, and what they're capable of producing versus what we saw last weekend. And that, again, not to harp on, I know this isn't always, but like it seems to be a reverted type issue with Johan van Graan. You think of all the big games that Munster have played, the Leinster game last time out, they just completely shut down. Last year as well in the big games, the semi-finals, the Champions Cup, they shut down, reverted type. Like the game is passing Johan van Graan by. And if I'm a Bath fan, I'm looking at that and going, is this what we're getting for the next couple of years?
Yeah, look, I'm sure. It's amazing that he was in demand by Munster and Bath, so he must be doing something.
He must have a good agent. He must have a good agent.
Something right. Work out. Yeah.
I think Birch is his agent.
No. I'm not representing anybody. The problem is that Cass came to Limerick there for the taking. They were ripe to get, a typical European performance. They had fellas who hadn't played Champions Cup before, and Munster never really put the gun to their head, and that some of that was around the decisions with penalties, just kick 3 points, and whereas I think if Munster had gone to the corner early in the game, I think the whole game could have changed. But they got caught in this game of cat and mouse, and in fairness, they were probably never going to lose it, but it was a dangerous game to play, and also it was a backward step for what we'd seen the week before in Wasps. And it's something that I think Larkham and Van Graan and Roundtree are going to have to look at for the rest of the season, because I don't think that game plan will beat the top teams. But
that game plan is redundant, Birch. It's redundant.
Yeah,
the game
has changed, but
it's moved on from that.
Yeah, it has, and I think Munster are underselling themselves by doing that. I think they have better players than we're seeing. But look at maybe because of all the different distractions and combinations, etc., they felt for that game it was the best way to go. But You'd like to see him over the next, when they play again, being a little bit more expansive in their mindset.
I don't know if they're capable of doing that under Van Graan, to be honest with you. I've long questioned, what it is that, this guy brings to Munster, and this is not after timing here. I know he's on the way out, but I've always just scratched my head when I've wondered, Munster in big games, we've seen glimpses of what they're very good at, but it's all very specifically coached areas of the game that Munster have been strong in. Their pack, their set piece, their line out. But the game has moved on a huge amount, even in the last 18 months, I feel, even just watching what Ireland are doing now and what other countries are doing now.
Yeah, there's no question about that. But the thing that I find frustrating, and to be fair, I mean, every Conor Murray box kick, you could almost sense the frustration within the crowd. You have to think you have to think he's playing to direction, because that wasn't the case in the game the previous week. But in terms of having an attacking strategy, when you look at the personnel that Munster have available to them, with Diolande, with Chris Farrell, with Andrew Conway, who every time he touches the ball, he does something positive, with Keith Earls. They have so many options at full back, be it Campbell now, Mike Haley, Simon Zebo, Gallagher. You think of all these guys, Calvin Nash, like they have the quality to be able to stress teams in other ways. And we have seen when you get to the knockout phase of, be it in Europe or even in the URC or Pro 14 as it was, Munster haven't been able to stress other packs up front to the extent that they will throughout the standard phase of the league programme. So it's massively frustrating from that point of view. I know there was a bit, you go back to the Wasps game and all the changes. There wasn't any great structure. It was a case of let the young fellas fly, let them off. But it was just so refreshing to watch. You go down, sit down on Sunday and you watch the way Connacht played against Leicester. Bear in mind, Leicester, that was their 13th competitive game. There were 12 out of 12 in all competitions. And Connacht were leading that game at half-time. They were still in the fight. Obviously got a losing bonus point. But they maximise the sum of their parts. Munster, there is so much more within that group that they haven't even touched. That, for me, is the frustration. I couldn't agree more than point. I read a piece by Stuart Barnes in the Times during the week, who I had great time.
Former Bath player.
Yeah, Barnes, great. He's actually watching afar. He's out in Australia. I think he's 2 kids living in Australia, so he's working. I know, because I was talking to him on the phone a couple of weeks ago. But he had a piece the other day. Bath, they've got their man. I think of any of the Bath fans, exactly what you're saying. If they watch the way Munster, because Bath through the years, Bath have always been a team that play fantastic rugby. And no, I think Van Graan has been very smart in terms of the move he's making. I would equate it to what Warren Gatland did back in 2002 when he got fired by Ireland. And Wasps had, you looked at the names on the team sheet, they had fantastic individual players, but they were going through a horrific time. They were down the bottom of the league, but Gatland looked at the personnel involved and he knew that this crowd could go places. I think Bath are in the exact same position, given the quality of personnel they have. But will Van Graan be able to lift them to the same extent that Warren Gatland did almost 20 years ago now, on the evidence of what we are seeing? No. I mean, I think the broader picture from a Munster perspective is why are all these fellas leaving? The likes of Rassie. Well, we know why Rassie and Nienaber left, to be fair. They got a carrot to go back to coach South Africa to win the World Cup. Kind of difficult to turn that down, really, when you think about it, when you're a passionate South African like they were. But, Jerry Flannery, Felix Jones, who've proved themselves since they've moved on. Stephen Larkham, I know, again, you have to take his family considerations into account. But, I just think it doesn't reflect well on Munster that these people are happy to move on.
No. And can you shed any light, Donal, briefly on Declan Kidney being linked with a move back? Is that something that's in the pipeline? He's been as a director of rugby type role. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I think this came out in the rugby paper. Obviously, I saw John Fallon picked it up. John was covering the Connacht game in Welford Road on Saturday, so he obviously picked it up there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a grain of truth in it. I mean, I can tell you, having had conversations with late Gareth Fitzgerald 10 years ago, when Declan finished up as national coach, there was a vision there that he would be the perfect guy as director of rugby and would have a vision for the province going forward. It never happened for one reason or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a grain of, if there is a bit of truth in it. Declan, he'll be 3 years in London Irish. He has done a brilliant job there. They were in the championship. He got them up to the Premiership. They're now mid-table to go into sort of being in contention to qualify for the Champions Cup next year. I'm quite sure he'll want to come home at some stage. But look, the issue with Munster at the moment, they have so many different personnel and roles that they have to fill. I mean, if you go down the director of rugby role, then he has to pick who the head coach is. And the head coach has to be happy with who the assistant coaches are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a jigsaw that has to be put together. So they have a lot of work to do.
Okay, we do have one match this weekend. It is Ulster against Connacht in the URC. Michael Glennon spoke to Ulster defence coach Jared Payne and started by asking him to assess Ulster's progress in the second block of the season.
Yeah, we're definitely making strides in some areas. We've been a lot better at some of our attack shape we've been working on pretty hard, giving us multiple options. And I think we saw that there on Friday night. We scored a great try early on in the game. So that was really pleasing to see. Some of our defensive work is coming through, the ability to keep our spacing really well. And it's all coming through. So we're making small steps in the right direction, definitely.
I think after the last two games, Dan, against Connacht, Dan wasn't very happy, would say, and he seems to suggest that there was something lacking in Ulster, that he was giving Connacht some credit, but he wasn't very complimentary of Ulster's own performance. Is that something you've addressed specifically about how your attitude is going into the game, specifically against Connacht?
Yeah, I think it's any game of rugby, isn't it? It's all easy during the week to say you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but when you actually get punched in the face in a game of rugby, you get hit hard. Things can change, can't they? So we've definitely addressed how we navigate our way through momentum and emotion of a game, good or bad. You know, when we're up against it, what we do as a group. When things are going well for us, what we do as a group. So we've definitely tried to put a few processes in place to help the guys, and I think they've used them pretty well in some of the games. Down in Clermont, there's a bit of a, it was, what was it, the third quarter, I think, where they came back at us pretty hard. There was a bit of pressure on the lads, and for them to have to navigate that space and come out on the right side was great. So we've definitely been working on different elements of how we get through a game momentum-wise and how we manage that. And it's going in the right direction, but there's always going to be ups and downs like anything. So I'm sure we get tested pretty well this week on it. I think they're class as a team at the moment, aren't they? Very dangerous, very aggressive in defence. They come forward and they score tries in defence. They put teams under pressure. So I think they've grown there. And then with attack, they've always been a team with a lot of variety. And they control the field position very well. So, yeah, I think they've grown massively as a team. And they're playing very well at the moment. So one word to sum them up, I'd say dangerous. Make both sides of the ball dangerous with the way they defend, and then dangerous with the variety they can play with. Whether it be starter players they've got a few nice little phase options as well. And if that doesn't go right, they've got a pretty good follower in Carty that can pin you, put you back in your own half. So they're a dangerous team at the moment.
So that was Jared Payne there speaking to Mick. And just before we get into the match itself, I guess news that Donal Lenihan is leaving Connacht. Wes, a really good player over the years for Connacht, and has got an opportunity at La Rochelle. And I think, if he's looking at this and saying, look, where am I in relation to the Irish picture with the amount of second rows coming through now and options that are for Andy Farrell, it's probably a great move for him at the end of his career, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even think it is the end of his career, really. I mean, he's still pretty young. Big loss for Connacht, and that he's the second international second row to leave in a short space of time. But they were unlucky the weekend just gone. Like, they did well to get the point at the end. I suppose that game and the Ulster game, like, just going back to Donald's point that the tournament's in a bit of a mess. Like, the atmosphere at both of those grounds, at Welford Road and in Ravenhill, kind of showed all that the tournament has going for it. Like, to me, when the tournament is going well, like, I think it's a better tournament than the Six Nations. So it's a huge shame to see it, I don't know, like, fall from grace a little bit. But I think the variety you get with it in terms of the players you see, the different venues you get to, it's just, I can't understand how all the constituent stakeholders have never made it the centerpiece of their calendar. But I suppose just on the flip side of that, like the English challenge for this tournament this year has been terrible. Like from the very outset, you looked at the whole list of teams from the Gallagher Premiership and you said, there's not a hope any of them are going to win it. Like Northampton were flying, lost both games. Wasn't that impressed with Leicester. Like I saw an article in someone, I think it was in the Irish press the weekend, saying that George Ford was the greatest out half to have ever played for England. It was
it Mike Ford who wrote it, no?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. And like then you see Courtney Laws playing up in Ravenhill, and like I saw him getting picked in World 15s and that a couple of months ago. And you're just back to kind of the old thing of them, some of these English players being massively overrated again. And anyway, I'm gone off Connacht there, but I suppose that was what struck me about the Leicester Connacht match, having a look at it.
Yeah, well, for Birch, obviously, an Irish player moving to France like that for Ulster to land, well, I think it's a fantastic move for him. And obviously, Ronan O'Gara would have had a hand in this one, but for him, it is towards the end of his career. He probably looked up and said, look, Ireland here, Connacht, I've had my time there. I need some sunshine. I need some decent weather. La Rochelle, here I come.
Yeah, Racing were very taken by him, I think, 16 or 17 months ago, and there was discussions there. And I think he signed for another year to really give it a proper lash under Farrell to see if he could force his way into being a regular Ireland starter. And in fairness, it doesn't look like he will be, and I think he's accepted that. And I think it's a great move for him. Sammy Arnold as well, obviously, is leaving to go to Brive for a 3-year contract. So I think those guys who are just outside the national team kind of window or choice of Andy Farrell, I think they should look at going away and having that experience. I mean, La Rochelle is obviously a beautiful place to live. Obviously, a very strong team. O'Gara's recruiting really well. Potentially win not far away from a top 14, maybe a Champions Cup winners in the next couple of years. So it's certainly not like throwing away your career. He can go and have a phenomenally exciting end of his career or a period in his career and then come back. But I certainly wouldn't begrudge him. It's obviously difficult for Connacht, as Wesley said. He lost Quinn Rue last year. They've got some good young locks,
and Donal Ryan's over there, isn't he, with Raj at the moment? Donal
Ryan is the forwards coach, yeah.
Yes.
So
we work with him.
There's a nice little Irish community there, but it's serious rugby as well. You know what I mean? It's playing in the top 14 is relentless, and probably that's why they take their eye off Europe a lot of times. I think the only way Europe will become a priority for the English and French is if they incentivize it like the Champions League, where you get a big payment for winning each match, because that's the only thing that'll matter to presidents in France is, and also director of rugby's get influenced by the presidents because they need to make the books tally. So that's the only way forward. I mean, just because we love it, we don't understand what the top 14 means. Yeah. We don't understand, the Leicester Northampton rivalry, etc. So for them, in fairness, they get that intensity or that rivalry or that prestige in their own leagues. Unfortunately for us, the URC is still trying to build that, and until they make it financially exciting for the French, they'll continue to treat it as they are at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Wes, the boss going to want to talk to you. RTÉ with the Six Nations back for the first time, and you're already pooing all over it, saying it's worse than European rugby. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you at all. Jesus.
Yeah, someone from Warner Brothers wants to talk to you about you living on the set of the Miami Vice remake.
Is it that bad? Jesus.
Well, Birch is in a library. You're in a 1980s remake, and Donal is lamenting the loss of his trips to France's best Christmas markets. I really doing something wrong here.
Yeah, listen, anyway, Ulster against Connacht live on RTÉ Radio 1 on December the 26th. That's as much as we have for you, with obviously the other game postponed. Gents, thanks for all your contribution over the year. We will be back after Christmas with a review of the action that did take place. But happy Christmas to you all. It's been a pleasure as always. And Donal, if you want that hug on the 26th, just give us a shout. I'm only 2 hours up the road, all right?
Virtual hug will do for me, Hugh.
Right, okay. Good luck, lads.
Man.
Thanks a million.
Bye-bye.
Good
Cheers.
luck.
The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.